And I don't know.
I completely agree with you. And again, I say go back to the myth. I think there's a lot of value in returning to the myth or the romantic treatment of it. So remember, the character of Lucifer, Satan, he's not a ragtag sort of... He's a princely figure. No, he's a majestic figure. He's an angelic aristocrat. You know, he has this sort of patrician pride to him.
But is being sort of, is I suppose, rebelling with class all there is to it?
Well, I would say it's something which differentiates it from, I think, what you're referring to is a sort of rebels without a cause.
Rebel without a clue, yeah.
Rebellion for its own sake.
Yes, I suppose.
And it's not that. It's really not that, that you find in the Miltonic romantic version. It's very much based upon principle.
Yeah.
Very much political. And that's what I think. If you go back to the myth, it's wonderfully the Miltonic romantic Satan. He's wonderfully highborn, if I may. And we may not be aristocrats. We may not be upper class folks, but there's a wonderful term which abounds in this field, which is aristocrat of the spirit. And I think that's significant. So if you go to the myth, you find that sort of spirit in there. And I think, tapping into that, what you get is a sort of refined radicalism.
So I guess, and we're in danger here of, I suppose, meandering into 100 different fields of definition, because we're sort of getting into, because certainly one of the things we're talking about here is the definition of rebellion and the definition of nobility. And the kind of the kind of contradiction between those two ideas, and I don't know. I suppose I'd quite like to draw it back in again to a sort of more personal level, and say, there are a lot of Satanists. There's a very powerful current within Satanism, which is kind of very misanthropic and very kind of retreat from the world. How do you feel about that?
I think that's part of the myth. Again, back to the myth. Lucifer has a third of heaven on his side. Right? So it's sort of the original counterculture.
It's a nice idea. Yes, the sort of the kind of the sort of the heaven's goths. Yes. Yeah, I guess, yeah. because one of the things you get is like, from my personal experience, talking about Satanism and, interacting with, I guess, with the media and people over the years, is one of the pitfalls, at least I see it's a pitfall, is that you can get, there's a temptation, you get drawn into performing, by which I mean people have expectations, and you kind of, it's difficult not to get drawn in to a certain extent to live up to those expectations. So they have these gothic ideas and they want, and you can camp it up and so forth. And I think it's a real mistake. I think one of the things, the conclusions I've reached about what Satanism is and what Satanism isn't, is that the modern conception of Satanism has so much to do with, I think, one way of putting it is, people have a temptation, we all have a temptation to imagine that the world that people around us, however far out there, are more like us than they actually are. Yeah? That kind of, and the more limited your imagination is, the more pervasive that particular illusion is. And so Christianity has, over the years, over the centuries, I guess, has imagined this foe, this satanic faith, the satanic boogeyman, and in their limitation of imagination, has imagined that it's what they're like in a funhouse mirror. So if they've got bishops and and cardinals and churches, and they do weird rituals and they're funny with children, then there must be Satanism must have evil clerics, evil bishops, and do funny things with children as well. So they've conjured this version up of what Satanism is, and you'll find it in Dennis Wheatley, you'll find it in modern horror films and everything. It doesn't exist, because of course the opposite of belief is not belief in something else. The opposite of belief is doubt. And the opposite of your kind of hierarchy of very sort of firmly entrenched different positions of clerics doing this and whatever else is not another version of that just does things differently. It's this kind of chaos of different people thinking differently. And that's what Satanism is. Satanism's not it's not a hierarchy. I think that the organizations within Satanism, and some of which are significant, are not the thing, and they're important. They're there, but they're not the thing. The thing is like the cultural tradition we've been talking about, and the fact that that's survived and that's sort of carried on.
Right. What you're talking about, the sort of mirror image thing. I mean, that's been part of it, part of the myth since the beginning. I mean, you get patristic writers, the early church fathers, treating Satan as a simia dei, the ape of God.
Yeah.
The idea that he just wants to, he wants to be God, and so he imitates, everything that God does or has. So yeah, that's been a part of what, I guess was satanic, from the start, and to a certain extent, there is a lot of playfulness with that.
I think that's a large part of it as well, and I think that's true of I think it's true across life, but it's most definitely true within Satanism. It's if you don't have a sense of humor, you don't get it.
Absolutely, and I think something you wrote in Lucifer Rising was that something that significantly differentiates Satanism from Orthodox religion is a good sense of humor.
Yeah.
Albeit a wicked sense of fun, but you have to be able to laugh.
Yes.
Rather than this stern-faced pomposity, which is what you get from Christianity, Judaism, certainly Islam.
It seems to be a unifying factor in bad shit is an absence of a sense of humor. Mm-hmm. So if you go through history and you go through the modern world, and you look at the guys who can laugh at themselves and the guys who can't, and if you line up with the guys who can laugh at themselves, you're usually pretty much on a winner. Mm-hmm. And
well, I definitely think I completely agree with you that, and certainly Byron, had a wonderful sense of humor, and I do think, when it comes to Satanism, that yes, humor is very important, but there needs to be some sorting out in terms of when it's appropriate to be humorous and when it's necessary to be very, very serious.
Yes, of course.
Like you say, you could be playful, but if you're not careful, you could find yourself, like I said, performing for people.
Yeah.
And ultimately reinforcing the stereotypes that they're looking to keep concrete.
Yeah.
So there needs to be, I think, a concerted effort to sort of break these stereotypes and defy expectation. And again, I think going back to the Miltonic Romantic tradition is a wonderful way of doing that. So you'll get some characters they'll invoke, the sort of red-faced, horned, goateed, suited figure.
The cliche you'll find on humorous cards and as
right. So if you're saying that the sort of heroic tradition of Satan, the arch rebel, the principal challenger of authority, is your version of Satan, that might not be the best way to show that, to illustrate that. Now, of course, there are always going to be people who are just never going to get it. They're never going to understand it, no matter what you show them, what you explain to them. But I do think if you show, say, the romantic renditions of Milton's Satan in the visual arts, people might understand what you're getting at. They might be surprised to see that, you know, they might look at that and say, you know, I thought that was Achilles or, you know, some classical hero or other, not Satan. But that's the point. You know, it's defying expectation. It's confounding, you know, people who have these very rigid ideas of what this, that, and the other is. So I think, again, going back to the Miltonic Romantic tradition, for me anyway, is a wonderful way of breaking up these crystallized ideas.